All right, welcome back, everybody, to the latest edition of Fellowship of the Rink. Our guest is a good friend, Mike Russo of The Athletic, and busy time of year. Mike, come back from Four Nations, and now it's right smack in the middle of trade deadline season.
Yeah, I was thinking at trade deadline going to like Victoria or Whistler and just vacationing, but as we're writing in today's Athletic, that's no longer the case. The Wild might be swimming in cap space in about 8 days.
Yeah, it is crazy how it works. Like we were thinking the last couple of months, like there's no chance and whatever that they could make a move. They would love to, but they don't have no cap space. And now the latest injury, I think, Joel Eriksson Ek, week to week, and we believe it's obviously longer than the couple of weeks that they had said initially. Like, what are the chances that this extends through the rest of the regular season, and what could that mean for what the Wild could do by next week?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really interesting. As you and I write in a story that's going to go up later today, they've got to get clarity on both guys going into March 7th, because if all of a sudden, Kaprizov and Eriksson Ek are going to be sidelined for the rest of the regular season, they not only have Eriksson Ek's $5.25 million that they could technically spend, but also Kaprizov's $9 million, and then do kind of what Tampa's done in the past with Kucherov, or obviously Vegas with their with the Mark Stone stuff, and have a bunch of money, and then these guys can come back in the playoffs. Caprizov is the one that I think that they are really hoping is going to be back by mid to late March. He obviously had the surgery, the abdominal surgery, and I think that the biggest thing here is the timeline was originally supposed to be 4 weeks. I think it's been extended out, but as you and I both know, he needs a runway to get ready. And so you don't first of all, they are not a lock to make the playoffs. He's their best bet to make the playoffs, and he needs a runway to get ready for the season. Eriksson Ek, Brodin, guys like that, you could probably throw on the ice game one of the playoffs, and they're going to be the same player. For some reason, Kaprizov always needs that runway. And we saw it in that Dallas series a couple of years ago, Joe. I mean, he said afterwards that he missed 13 straight games with the hammy, and then they held him out 2 of the last 4 games. And I think that because of that, he just never got going. He scored the first goal against Dallas, and then that was it. We didn't see him sort of score again. And so I think they want to get him back. So I don't think they want to play games with that. Eriksson Ek, though, this is a pressing matter. Like, if he is gone 6 to 8 weeks, which is the timeline I keep on hearing, well, 7 weeks is the beginning of the playoffs. So, to me, you push that, but they can't just push that and not replace him. They have to go get a center. This team is just not deep enough. Marco Rossi's done an incredible job of stepping up all season long, but behind him are right now Gaudreau, Kuznetsov, and Devin Shore until Ryan Hartman comes back. And if one of those guys gets hurt, they're effed. So they've got to get a center, and I think that's gonna be the priority here in the next week and change before that 2 p.m. Central Time deadline on March 7th.
Well, absolutely, and I think with the centers that are on the market, and we've written about a few of these all season long, and Brock Nelson comes to mind. There's guys Cousins, obviously, with the Sabres. Like, if you have that $5.25 million, who would be your go-to target at this point?
Probably Brock Nelson. I just think that he can, for 2 reasons. One, I think he can help in many, many ways now. And we know that the Wild have interest in bringing him back, so it would help in the future as well. He is somebody that right now, if you're going to replace Joel, it's hard to replace everything that Eriksson Ek does. But because Brock Nelson is so good in the faceoff circle and a great penalty killer, and we know could chip in offensively because all he does is score against the Wild. We've seen it in this building. I think that he can really step into that locker room and make an impact right away. I also think that Lou Lamoriello has a great respect for him, and if he's not going to resign there, he'd probably put him in a place where he wants to play. The problem is that there's a lot of teams that are going to be interested in Brock Nelson at the deadline. And so I don't know if the Wild have the assets or are willing to give up the assets that it would take to get any of these guys. Frankly, they gave up their first round pick already in David Jiricek. I can't imagine after giving up your first round pick that you want to trade future first round picks. So then all you got is your second round pick, and then you have to start looking at your prospects. Well, any team is going to ask about Zeev Buium and Janelle Urov and guys like that. I would assume that they are absolutely not being traded. So, so then who's next? Can you lasso one of these guys by throwing in a Liam Ogren, by throwing in a Riley Heidt, a Hunter Haight, somebody like that? This is what I wonder, and so I just don't know once the bidding war starts, if the Wild will have those assets. Cousins is intriguing because this would be a hockey trade. He's 24 years old. They have a lot of appreciation for him. There is got to be a reason why the Wild pro scouts are at every Buffalo Sabres game these days. In fact, Chris Kelleher was there last night when Cousins had 3 assists and assisted on all their goals in their comeback win. He's 24. He's big. He was an absolute junior star. He scored 31 goals as a 21/22-year-old in this league. My biggest concern with him is he just hasn't been the same player the last 2 years. He got absolutely destroyed in a fight with Garnet Hathaway a couple of Novembers ago. And if you watch that fight on YouTube, he just gets, essentially knocked out. And he just hasn't been the same player since, whether that's related or not. But huge upside. The other thing with him that's really intriguing, Joe, is that he's got cost certainty. He signed for 5 or 6 more years at 7-1 with a cap going up. 7-1 is if he turns into the player that the Wild or any other team thinks he could be, that absolutely would be something they could afford. What I would be concerned with is if you trade for Dylan Cousins at 7-1, does that make it much harder to afford Marco Rossi this summer? You could probably make both work, but it would probably take him out of every other unrestricted free agent plan that they want to do this offseason. But to have a Cousins and a Rossi up the middle with Eriksson Ek, that's pretty freaking good. And then you have Europe coming. So I do think that's intriguing. The other thing that makes me think it's doubtful is I don't know if Buffalo is going to be allowed to trade anybody at the deadline. Like if they're going to clean house, if Kevin Adams is potentially going to lose his job after the season, if you're the owner and Terry Pegula, the Pegulas, are you letting Kevin make significant moves with any of your players at the deadline? So that would be my only other question there, is that if his job's on the line, is he allowed to trade a Tuck, a Cousins, whoever? I think they're probably scared to trade anybody right now.
With the question with Caprizov, I think a lot of fans are a little frustrated because it went from day to day on December 23rd, missed a bunch of time. I think they wanted to rehab as opposed to doing surgery, which happens a lot of different teams. I think the concern is that it's such a vague, and kind of fans feel like they haven't been as much transparency from a team, which I know is natural with injuries. But is there any long-term concern here with Kaprizov injury-wise? I know I talked to Bill Guerin a few weeks back. He said he's not concerned with the injury history in terms of giving him a big extension this summertime, but it seems as though this has been a weird year for him, and a lot of things behind the scenes where this isn't just cut and dry. As this is why Bill Guerin's saying I don't know, because maybe he doesn't really know how long.
Yeah, I don't think he knows, also because I think that this doctor was found by the agent, and so I think that it's not their medical team that's doing it, which is not abnormal, by the way. Like a lot of times when players have the type of surgery that Kirill's having, you sort of outsource it, and we've seen that with a lot of players. Over the years, Marcus Foligno has gone to different doctors that's just the way it works in the National Hockey League. There are certain experts. We've seen that throughout history. If people go into James Andrews or Tony Miniacci, these famous doctors, Mark Philippon. And I think that's what happened here. So that could be part of it. I think they want to be careful with him. The type of surgery that I hear that he's had is not abnormal at all to hockey players. And so I'm not worried about him long-term. But I get why the fans are frustrated. One, they pay a lot of money to come and watch this guy play, and they haven't seen him on the ice really since December 23rd, other than 3 games, and some of those were on the road. And again, the transparency, it's Bill Guerin's way. He just is not transparent with injuries, with timetables, things like that. It's been that way historically with him here, and I know that frustrates fans, and that's what it's come down to here. When he was first listed as day-to-day, I don't think the Wild were lying at all. I think they were trying, he was day-to-day. They were trying over those courses of days to figure out what he was dealing with and how to treat it. He was leaving in and out of town to go see specialists, get things done and things like that. And obviously when he came back for those 3 games, I do think that those 3 games were actually a test trial between Kaprizov, the Wild, and his agent, to just see how does it feel. And even though he looked good to me, he didn't have that burst that we saw, that we usually are accustomed to seeing from him. and he has a high standard for how he's playing. Nobody knows what he was feeling. I'm sure he was in discomfort. And finally, after that Chicago game, he obviously decided it was time to get this fixed. So I still think that we're going to see him in the regular season. And because of that, I don't think that they could just go out and use his $9 million if they know that he's going to be back.
Sure. And on the flip side of things, Mike, I mean, you were out with Team USA covering all the Four Nations tournament. You talk about the fans being upset about, lack of disclosure on Caprizov. Now everyone's going crazy, whether it's on Twitter or the Boston Bruins front office, about the Wild's medical staff. And I know you've been a staunch defender. Like, what do you say to the people out there who are freaking out about the Wild medical staff?
Well, I'm not being a staunch defender. I'm just saying that everybody's taking a couple of, mysterious statements that made it very clear that the Bruins weren't happy, and now are just saying that the Wild's medical staff is garbage. That's my only thing. We don't know many details right now with what McAvoy was dealing with. Something happened where he was hurt against Finland in the third period, it looks like, on video, when he was hit into the goalpost by Joel Armia. Although he had his right surgery, he had his right shoulder injured and he grabs his left one. So I can't say for sure that we know that was the play. But something happened in that game. Against Canada, he decided to play. Clearly, he had a shoulder injury, and they decided to shoot him up to play the game in concert with the player. What we don't know is, was that in consultation with the Bruins doctors? Did the USA Hockey not consult with them because their GM was Canada's GM? Who knows? But they gave him a shot, and there was clearly some sort of an infection that came from that for some reason. And clearly the Bruins weren't happy. We don't know all the details. Maybe that will come out at some point, but Don Sweeney met with media the other day and obviously didn't really go further into what they were upset about. And so we don't know. But now, because the Wild have been inundated with injuries this year and last year, everybody's just saying that they've got the worst medical staff ever. When you look at a lot of these injuries, and there's stuff that, it's not a doctor's job to prevent a guy from getting a puck to the face. Joel Eriksson Ek has a broken foot. I mean, that is what's going on here. Bill Guerin doesn't want to say it. I'll say it. Now, when did that happen? That's what we don't know. Did it happen before the break? I do remember him blocking his last game against Carolina. He blocked a couple shots. He obviously missed the next game. Now, was it because of that? And did they decide to let him go? Technically, these teams, unless you're not medically clear, don't have the right, or weren't supposed to have the right to pull you. It's up to the player. It was always going to be player's choice. He decided to go and play. Did it worsen? Did it get hurt in Detroit? Did it get aggravated in practice? He obviously went through that entire practice the other day. We don't know. But now, because of all these injuries, everybody's just saying they got, for the rest of the time now, anytime we write a guy's out, we're going to have to go and say, oh, their medical staff needs to be overhauled. I think, like everything, at the end of the season, Bill Guerin, like he does with his players, with his staff, everything, I think he'll look at everything and then make a decision. All right, does he agree? Right now, from what I gather, is that he's got the utmost confidence in his medical staff. The other thing here is that Dr. Boyd was the USA Hockey doctor. He's been the USA Hockey doctor since the 90s. He's a great doctor. He's been the Wild's orthopedic surgeon since day one, but he's the Wild's orthopedic surgeon. He deals with specific injuries with the Wild. He has nothing to do with Kirill Kaprizov's injury. He has nothing to do with what's going on with Jacob Lauko. They have different specialists for different things, but now it's like anytime anybody's hurt, you're going to blame this guy and this guy and this guy. I mean, it's just, to me, until we get more information, and trust me, Joe and I are asking questions and doing a lot of digging on this subject. But, the other thing here that I'll say is, I think because the Wild's policy, or Bill Guerin's policy, is not to give specific injury updates and timetables, there's fans here that are frustrated about that. And they're just assuming that the Wild don't know the injuries and don't know the timetables, and guys are being misdiagnosed. And they're conflating the two, where the reality is that they just are not telling us. And that's just Bill Guerin's way when it comes to injuries. And so I get why fans are frustrated, but, they're now meshing everything together. And a lot of this is just social media nonsense, where people are just, throwing out a bunch of baloney. I mean, even the Matthew Tkachuk stuff, like, could USA Hockey say you are not playing? Absolutely. I don't think he would. I think it would have been over his dead body. But Like, there are people out there saying, well, the Florida Panthers must be irate about this. Bill Zito, the president and GM of the Florida Panthers, was Bill Guerin's assistant GM. He knew exactly what was going on and what was being risked with Matthew Tkachuk. He knew the severity of that injury going into that game. They allowed him to play. And so, like, again, this is nothing to do with the USA medical staff there. You know, it's they can make a recommendation, but then it's up eventually up to the player whether he's playing or not, unless they are just saying you are not playing, or the GM is saying you are not playing. And clearly, you know, to me, that didn't happen there.
This interview is brought to you by our friends at Waggle Golf. Waggle Golf believes what you wear on the course should reflect your individuality, who you are, where you're from, your hobbies, interests, and passions. All the stuff that makes you, well, you. That's why every design is inspired by the desire to create a piece of apparel that strikes a chord when you see it, that makes you say, wow, that was made for me. Because in a lot of ways, it was. Ready to get your Waggle on? Go to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10 at checkout to take 10% off your entire order.
With the trade deadline, you mentioned maybe a hockey trade with Cousins or something like that. I know a lot of guys have no move and no trade clauses. Is there anybody on this roster you could see like, hey, as part of a hockey trade, these guys could be potentially looked at?
Well, I mean, it's going to be really hard because of the no moves. I mean, obviously, I know a lot of Wild fans are like Ryan Hartman, but he does have a full no move that turns into a modified no trade July 1. So if he's traded, I think it happens in the offseason. The guys that I look at are can he find somebody to take Freddie Gaudreau, who's got a 15-note trade? You know, you'd love at this point, like I think the Yakov Trenin, I like him as a player, but that contract is, you know, if they can move it, I think they would love to. And then the other thing is, can they move money out? You know, do you move a Declan Chisholm? Do you move a Johnny Merrill? You know, again, they're sending Dermott to the minors today if he's not claimed on waivers. So they would have him at least as insurance. But if all of a sudden you do lose Dermott, you know, do you just throw away a Chisholm or a Merrill? You know, when then you're an injury away from having major problems. So I don't know if that's really a pressing thing. Like, to me, if you traded a Chisholm or a Merrill, you'd probably want to get a defenseman back in some capacity, some sort of insurance. So, but you know, now if they do have a bunch of cap space going to the deadline, they are going to have options. The problem is you can be over 23 men after the playoffs, but you have to be cap compliant. And after the trade deadline, you have to, you know, you could be over 23 guys, but you have to be cap compliant. And if you're going to add a bunch of players, you're probably going to want to move some guys out. You don't want a bunch of players just sitting around not playing. That became a problem in the Dallas series. Don't you agree, Joe? Like all of a sudden, you know, they added Klingberg, they added all these guys at the deadline, and next thing you know, Sundqvist and Johansson, all of a sudden guys are just sitting in the press box not playing. I mean, Nick Bukestad Alex Goligoski, I don't even remember them playing in the playoffs. So I don't know if you want a bunch of guys just sitting around not playing.
So speaking of sitting around not playing, Ryan Hartman spoke yesterday for the first time since his 10-game suspension was now reduced by Gary Bettman down to 8, which is a rare thing for Gary to do that. You know, clearly he's been working his bag off just to get ready, and he'll probably be in great shape when he gets back. I guess the question for me, as always, is will this affect change in Ryan Hartman? Because I know this is his 5th suspension since April 2022 or 20. And so I think, you know, curious listening to him yesterday, kind of reiterate what he said in the hearing and everything, and with Gary Bettman, that it wasn't intentional to hurt Stützle. He didn't even know who was in the faceoff circle with him at that particular time. He was just trying to win a faceoff in the heat of the moment. And I'm really curious if this will be a wake-up call, as Gary Bettman suggested, as Bill Guerin suggested to me, as I've kind of suggested in my column. And do you think this might be one that sinks in for him? And if not, like, is this something where he has to probably worry about the patience from the organization from a lot of these things that are happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's going to know that he can't cross that line. The problem is that there's a certain style that he's got to play to be effective And that's a lot of times going over that, going to that line and just trying not to cross it. And, that would be my biggest concern is does he hurt his own game because he's so scared of doing something that's going to draw the eyes of the league and most importantly, the refs. I do think that the refs are going to be watching him now. He has a tendency to lose his temper. I think that was part of what happened in that game in Ottawa. If you watch that second period, he is jawing with Garrett Rank, the referee, the entire period. He was getting into Travis Tomanek, and then I think Garrett came to the bench and tried to calm it down and essentially told him that you're very close to crossing that line, and then just didn't take his eyes off of him. So, all of a sudden when he gets into it with Stützle the first time, Garrett's just watching it, and he got two-handed and he goes down and he gets called for an embellishment penalty that I think defies logic that to think that he dove in that situation. And I think that's what made Ryan really angry. Is that. But then Ryan's got to be smart and know that, all right, now the referee is really going to be watching me. The ref knows this situation just happened, knows that Ryan's angry, and now Garrett who's a really good ref, is watching Ryan Hartman, whether Ryan knew it was Stützle or not, which I can't imagine he didn't, but whether Ryan knew it was Stützle or not, Garrett Rank knows it's Stützle. So he is watching Ryan like a hawk on that faceoff to make sure that there's no retaliation from the previous incident that they had a couple shifts before. And then the thing happens and he sees it. I mean, I was amazed that Garrett saw that at real time, what Ryan did, because when it first happened, I'm like, what are you talking about? Match penalty. And then I saw the replay. I'm like, wow, I can't believe, because if you look where Garrett is in the corner, it's hard to even see that he was able to see exactly what he did, because he's sort of in the far corner behind the faceoff. So it's pretty actually impressive. But yeah, I mean, to get to your point, Ryan's not Ryan's a good hockey player, but he's got to know that he can't cross the line again. And he's just got to figure out a way to play his style of game like a lot of players do in this league without going that extra mile. And, he's lucky from the league standpoint that he didn't, when he kicked out Draisaitl's legs in the same game that I can't remember what happened that caused him to do it. But it was the McDavid. It was some McDavid Johansson. And I think a lot of people think that Ryan's old school and probably went after Draisaitl intentionally there. You're going to go after your star is going to go after our player, so I'm going to go after another star. And I know the league was not happy when he kicked Draisaitl's legs out. And so it just felt like in that sequence of a couple of weeks, Ryan was getting to that point where I think he was frustrated with his deployment in games too, being suddenly downgraded in the lineup. I'm sure he's trying to do things to make himself more effective. And unfortunately, in this case, he went over the line. But I do think that Ryan's smart enough to realize that he's going to have all these eyes on him. And so I guess my biggest concern is that if he doesn't, if he's always cognizant of, I can't cross the line, does that take away from his game? Is he can be a little late getting to checks and pucks and things like that. And to answer your other question, I do think that patience is running thin inside the organization from everything that I'm hearing. And so, I really do think that this offseason they are going to look to try to trade him. So he better be pretty strategic with that no trade list that he turns in on June 30th.
Yeah, don't leave the Sabres off like Eric Stahl did.
I just think that he's a effective player when he played that way, and the guys love him in the room, and I think he wants to stay. And so I think the next 20 last games of the season will be really telling for me and for the organization and everything else. If he can be that player, they need him badly with Ek out, and they don't have a lot of center depth. So if he can play center or wing, this is going to be
we were talking to a former teammate of Ryan. I won't say who it was, Joe, but in the press box, you and I yesterday, and this player used to hate playing against Hartman and then became his teammate in Minnesota. And he's like, this guy's the greatest guy in the world. And that's the one thing. I mean, he's loved by his teammates, even, through stuff like this that clearly pisses off the organization because it's put them in a real bind, roster wise. I mean, a guy's losing his job today. The Wild are going to, he's losing his job because the Wild need an extra forward for this road trip, which will happen, either today or after tonight's Iowa game. So, but I think that his teammates definitely love him, but I definitely think that Bill Guerin is can't be happy with the further pickle that this has put the Wild in.
Before we let you go, I mean, I know the Four Nations took over most of your life for a couple of weeks, and we watched it on TV and could imagine what the atmosphere was like in person. Like, do you have a favorite moment or memory from that time covering it that you're like, this was a unique experience?
Yeah, I mean, part of it, because I covered Minnesota, there was I just loved being around USA hockey and watching Brock Faber and Matt Boldy get the accolades that we always see here. Brock Faber is now on the national stage. Now people get it. As a GM told me the other day, $8.5 million is going to be nothing for him in a couple of years when the cap continues to go up. And Boldy obviously performed well as well. But the hockey was awesome. It was just great. The access was incredible. Just being around those guys. It was awesome getting to know a lot of these USA hockey guys, better, the Charlie McAvoys, Dylan Larkin, just even, you saw last night, getting and chatting with him again and getting to know him was cool. But the league and the PA did such a great job, and all the credit goes to the players, because if they went there thinking this was going to be a glorified all-star game, it would not have been nearly as entertaining. And as much as it sucks to see so many guys around the league hurt from this tournament, this is why the league and the PA wanted it in this window, because it was theirs. There was no football to contend with. There's no baseball, stretch drive for the playoffs coming up. It was just hockey. And they did an incredible job. And so I give the league and the PA all the credit for this iteration. It sucks. Like, if you're a Florida Panthers fan, if you're a Vegas Golden Knights fan with Shea Theodore, if you're, Ottawa with Brady Tkachuk, Rangers have had a couple injuries, and we think that maybe Eriksson Ek worsened whatever he had during the tournament. I mean, you're not happy right now. But this is the price of doing business. We knew it was inevitable that there'd be injuries.
Final question, brought to you as always by our good friends at Waggle Golf. First, make sure you head over to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10 to take 10% off your entire order. You and LaPanta talked about it on your show, and I know he's not the only name that was named, but I'm much like you, that I like the idea of bringing a young guy, get experience for, future iterations of international competition. Kind of a two-parter, I guess. One, do you think that there's a real shot that a guy like Zeev Buium could be part of the 2026 Olympic roster for Team USA? And if so, how brutal are your mentions going to be with people screaming nepotism?
Yeah. I mean, well, I got it with Boldy and Faber and those guys. I think validated the reason why they were put on the team. I do think there's a shot. I mean, there's a lot of runway that we have to see here. I mean, maybe Adam Fox sort of fixes himself in the next year, but the way that he played in this tournament, I really think that of the 8D that were there, if you include Quinn Hughes, I think 7 are probably back, at least 6. I think Sanderson's going to be part of it. Faber's going to be part of it. Slavin's going to be part of it. McAvoy, Hughes, and Werenski. Hannafin probably, but if not, you have 2 guys that are probably coming out in Hannafin and Adam Fox. But my guess is Hannafin's there. So then the question is, what do you do with that 8D spot? Do you give it to a guy like Seth Jones or John Carlson or somebody like that? Neil Pionk, who's had a really good year for Winnipeg. Or do you go young? Do you look at Lane Hudson? Do you look at Alex Vlasic? Or do you look at a Zeev Buium? Historically, it would be a prudent thing for USA Hockey to take a future stud that's going to be part of future World Cups and Olympics and just give him that taste of being around the team and all that type of stuff. So I think there's a shot. Way too premature to say. But if I had to bet right now, I think the 8th D does go to a Vlasic or a Buium or a Hudson or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, much like Drew Doughty, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And and Doughty in that one, he wound up playing a lot. Or didn't he if I'm right, didn't he went in as 8th D and wound up playing a bunch of games?
He ended up slotting in, and he also almost slept through the bus to get to the game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty I don't know. I think it would be a good experience, and you're right, it probably helps them that Bill Guerin's running the show.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us again. We will catch up with you after the trade deadline, which should be a busy one for you. So don't get any ski lift passes for anywhere up in Whistler or anything like that. When you're going to Seattle and Vancouver.
Yes, I will not. You don't want to see me on a ski hill anyway. I once did, those pull ropes. I once couldn't even navigate that when I was skiing in Malone, New York. Once I was like, I'm like, how do people get up on the, So if I can't go up on a bunny hill on a pull rope, you think that at this age and this weight, I'm going to be able to go up? I have been on ski lifts before, though. Actually, funny story: the 2010 Olympics. I was covering before the hockey started. I covered a lot of luge and skiing, so I was going up the mountain to do this is when I was at the Strib. I was doing a Lindsey Vonn feature, and so I take the media bus from Vancouver all the way up to Whistler at like 4 a.m. Then I take another media bus to get up to the ski hill to go there, and I'm just wearing a freaking like light jacket like this, and my normal attire, boat shoes and slacks. And all of a sudden they're like, I'm like, all right, where's the media center? Like, oh, you take this ski lift up the mountain and you get up there. So anyway, so I'm out the ski lift and it's beautiful. I'm taking pictures. And again, I'm wearing slacks and boat shoes. And all of a sudden we're coming down and I start to realize that the media center is about 200 yards up the mountain and that I'm going to have to walk through snow to get there. And let's put it this way. When I walked into that media center, I took off my shoes because they were absolutely soaking wet and I was wearing dress socks. And I took one step on this laminate tile and I went ass over teacup. Made the loudest noise that you could ever hear. I look up absolutely humiliated and I got just a bunch of like the world's greatest ski reporters staring at me looking at who the hell is this moron that's not dressed for the occasion. So yeah.
Just a hockey writer.
Yeah. So I've learned my lesson for the Milan Olympics, just in case I am having to cover skiing there.
Well, great. Well, thanks again for joining. We already have one beat writer for the Wild on crutches. Don't need two. So we'll.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. Take care, Mike.
See ya.